How do we know what we know about turfgrass science? Welcome to Turfgrass Epistemology. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Turfgrass Epistemology. I'm so glad you could be here tonight. In this episode, we're going to talk about liquid aeration. We're going to show probably the best example I'm ever going to come across of cherry picking data. And I'm actually thinking probably in a future video, I watched some of the other video from another time we're going to do it in the future. It might actually be extraordinary cherry picking of data. And I might explain that if I remember tonight. Otherwise, the next time I go over this part 2 of this video, I'll definitely go over it because he mentions it. But very, very good cherry picking in this episode. This episode is really going to show how sales and marketing exploit university research to their favor. And for those of you who don't know, I was in sales for 6 or 7 years, and we were conducting research at 14, 15, 16 different universities. And so I'm very keenly aware of how those data are used behind the scenes. And tonight we're going to go over exactly that topic. We have a turf thought at the end. So look forward to that. Okay. Welcome to all the new members. We have several new members join this week. For some reason, I can't put their link on the screen. Oh, maybe I can. I can. There you go. Sautaro Akishino. Sounds like he's maybe from Japan, is new. We had 2 or 3 other new members that their links kicked off, I guess, or their announcement kicked off before tonight's episode started, so I wasn't able to put them on there. But we have a lot of new members. Remember, the members only episode is on Monday mornings. And I'm going to do my best on, I think, either Wednesdays or Thursdays. I'll be uploading a pro member only audio podcast only on YouTube. It's partially AI generated, so I don't have to spend so much time doing it. But it'll be less than 10 minutes. And it'll only be about scientific articles. So look forward to that in the future if you're a pro member. It'll be, hey, this article came out, and it's just a 10-minute podcast about the one specific article, and it's short to the sweet. I don't meander. There's no like pontification of anything. There's just straight to the point. What they did, why is it important to you? So I'm hoping to kind of get that in a regular cycle in the near future if you're a pro member. Okay, so tonight we're going to show a little bit of a scientific article, a little bit of the data, the actual data, but the entire episode is going to be about really one of the best charlatans I've ever come across in my life, but particularly in the world of turfgrass science. And he's the gift that keeps on giving. It never ends. And unfortunately, he stopped putting videos on his channel. The channel is called Lawncology. Next Level Lawns. I guess that's the name of the channel. Thought it was just Lawncology, but maybe it's not maybe it's Lawncology Next Level Lawns. And he stopped putting videos out about, 7 or 8 months ago. It's a real shame because it's rare that he has a video go out that doesn't contain some level of BS that justifies my inclusion. My comments. He's been on Tinfoil Turfgrass before it was even named Tinfoil Turfgrass. Mr. John Perry. So we're going to go over an episode tonight about liquid aeration and John Perry. Let's get started. Okay, in this episode, Tinfoil Turfgrass, we have a video from Lawncology entitled, if I can get it up here, right here, entitled, Does It Work? Liquid Aeration Study, University Trials Data, Part 1. The actual title of the episode is not in the thumbnail. It says Aerate, Does It Work? Liquid Aeration University Study, Part 1. And we're going to watch this in its entirety. It's only about 10 or 11 minutes long. And I'm going to provide my comments and primarily just my off the top of my head thoughts about it. And then we're going to show the actual study that was published and explain and show how what he's saying is just completely inaccurate. It doesn't even align with the actual study results at all. I don't know how he's making it up, or if he's lying about it, or he's just ignorant and doesn't understand how to read the data. I don't know, but what he's saying does not align with the actual results of the study. So let's get to it. Let's see what John has to say.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back. Today is the first day of spring, and I thought, what a better way to kick off this 2021 spring than talking about the 2020 Aerate trials. The big question on everybody's mind is, does liquid aeration work? Yeah.
There's one. I did an episode a while back. It was about cold reading and hot reading, and how these con artists and scam artists sometimes will use cold reading to convince you that, to buy their products or services, or that they work or whatever. But in that, it talked about the con man is particularly good whenever they're able to ham it up, kind of slapping backs and drinking beers and just kind of real quick-witted and just joking around or whatever. And John Perry is the best at that. Legitimately, I have a lot to learn from him. I have very poor social skills. If you haven't figured that out already. And he's very, very good at looking someone in the eye and just completely BSing his way through whatever he's going to talk about. And he's really good about just hamming it up. And I don't mean, it sounds like I'm saying that in a bad way. I mean, I'm saying that in a weird sort of complimentary way. I have no ability to do that. And I would actually benefit from having some sort of social skill in that area. And I don't. And he does. It's fantastic.
So first things first, if you haven't subscribed, please do so. Very important, because there's a whole lot of stuff that's going to come out of this particular study. And I'm going to break this into a 3-part series, and you really don't want to miss it.
No, yeah, we're not going to miss it, John. I'm going to turn your 3 videos, 10 minutes each, into probably 3 hours of total content. I'm not going to miss a second of it. I love this stuff. You can't tell by the expression on my face. I could watch these videos all day, every day. I love them. They're so completely full of BS. It's complete nonsense. It's just a perfect example of how to explain fallacies and how salesmen and companies skew information and cherry pick information. And they use the Texas sharpshooter all the time on data and studies. It's just fantastic. I would much rather watch this than go to the movies, honestly. It's just great. And so John, don't worry. I am not going to miss a thing. I guarantee you I'm going to be here for every second.
So let's go ahead and set up some parameters here on the way this whole thing worked and what you're really looking at when we talk about liquid aeration. So here's one thing to note. This video is going to be about Aerate. And the reason it's about Aerate is because it is my product. Now, I haven't seen any other university data on any other liquid aeration product to say anything on whether or not their claims are accurate or inaccurate, and I will not go down that road.
It's interesting he says that. He's interested about the claims of other Aerate products being accurate or inaccurate. And then he proceeds in this video, and there's another video where he's actually being interviewed by some gentleman, don't know his name, where I think he's just outright lying to the guy. I mean, I don't know what's in John's head, so I can't say he's lying. I don't know, because only he knows what's in his head. But I think he knows what he's saying is not true. And he's just saying it anyway in the interview video, which we'll eventually go over. But it's interesting he says that about other people's products. I can't speak for their products. Well, he's going to speak for his product, and he completely just misrepresents the entire thing. So if I had a product, I wouldn't want you to talk about my product.
All I can do is provide the information to which we studied based on our material and give that to you.
Yeah, you're going to do it in a way that is so misleading. And I don't mind bending it a little bit in your favor if you pay for the research. You want to show the favorable results. I get that. But it's just so misleading and just outright inaccurate. What he says is just outright inaccurate relative to the published ref read paper, which I'm going to show you. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know how they sleep at night. I honestly don't know. I don't know. I don't know what the definition of a psychopath is, but they must have no conscience, no feeling of guilt or remorse or something. I don't know. I don't know how he does it. But what he says is almost to a T, one after the other, with the exception of roots, one after the other, completely inaccurate. It's not even close. And I'm going to show you that tonight.
So liquid aeration has been around for longer than most people think. It's just really caught traction in the last few years, and everybody really seems to like the results that they get. Well, most people can see things and they mark them down and they can chalk them up easily to the material that they're using. Pretty simple, right? So out of the...
Well, you don't want to do that. I mean, the last thing you want to do is come to the conclusion that what you put out it was the cause of whatever you saw. It sounds maybe strange to people who haven't listened to this channel yet, but clearly something in that concoction that you put out likely resulted in the response you saw. Something in there probably did. But you don't know that, especially if it's a blend of materials and you don't have a control out there. And so you can easily be fooled into the composition division fallacy real quick. Like you have a blend of, say, 5 things, and you put it out and you say, well, all that resulted in my response. So let's say you had NK, iron, phosphorus, manganese, or whatever. And yeah, well, the potassium helped, because I put it out and it saw a response. So what he's saying is, well, you see the results and you see what happened. Well, I would be careful about that, because the likelihood that you've committed a flaw in reasoning is pretty high, especially in lawn care, and just in turf in general, where you have all these blends of materials that have all this stuff in it, and you're convinced that potassium caused it, or you're convinced that granular iron caused it. When you put it out with 2 or 3 other things that are known to induce a response, and there's almost no evidence that that particular component does induce a response. So I'd just be real careful with that. This channel is a Trojan horse critical thinking system is what it is. I'm smuggling in critical thinking by using soils and turf. The actual soil and turf thing to me is almost irrelevant. What I'm trying to do is get people to think critically about it. I'm not saying that what you put out didn't cause it. What I'm saying is, how do you know that all the components in that caused it? And what he's saying is, well, you put it out and it looked good, so we all know that. Well, be careful with that. That's what I'm getting at.
Hundreds of thousands of lawns, hundreds of thousands of customers, hundreds of thousands of people around the country who have been using liquid aeration products. Maybe it's even millions of people. There still can be some lingering questions as to, does the material do what it's supposed to do?
Yeah, so what he's doing is and again, I don't particularly give John enough credit. I don't think he's particularly knowledgeable to know what he's doing and what the flaw he's committing. But what he's trying to do is he's trying to appeal to popularity. Well, hundreds of thousands of people, maybe millions of people do that. And that's an appeal to popularity, or a bandwagon fallacy, meaning that so many people do it, there must be something to it. They must be right. Not everybody can be wrong. That's a very common flaw and a very common sales tactic that people will put on their marketing flyers. 10 of the top 20 courses in the world use this product. I don't care. I don't care if all of them use it, and I don't care if none of them use it. All of them could use it and they could all be wrong, and none of them can use it and they could all be wrong. Maybe they should use it when none of them are. Maybe they shouldn't use it when all of them are. So the number of people, what he's saying is millions of people use liquid aeration. The number of people that use it has absolutely 0.0 bearing on whether or not that claim is true or that product actually results in it. None whatsoever. What's the Animal House line? 0.0. That's literally the percentage of accuracy in assuming that so many people use it, therefore it must be true. It's not the case. That's a flawed reason called an appeal to popularity, or the bandwagon fallacy. And that's what he's doing. Again, I don't think he's conscious about it, because I don't think he's actually that intelligent to realize that. But that's what he's doing. He's talking about the number of people, trying to convince you that so many people use it, therefore you should use it.
Let's lay out some quick parameters on aeration in general, just so we are on the same page as what that machine is doing for you anyhow. So here's the top 4 reasons that people would aerate. Number 1, to boost root growth. That's very important. Number 2, to reduce compaction. Number 3, to help water and nutrients flow down deeper. And number 4, and this one I think to a lesser extent, but I know a lot of people who do this, is thatch reduction.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to argue with that. Whatever, it's fine. Usually it's just compaction and just into increased turfgrass performance or growth, whatever it is. There's thin turf, there's a bunch of people driving over it with their golf cart, or a bunch of football players coming out from underneath the bleachers, or whatever the case is, and it's compacted and it's difficult to get the turf to grow back in. So I would, whatever, it's fine. He's in the ballpark, not a problem.
So the question that needed to be answered was, can you get the same or very similar results by applying a liquid as you could with doing a mechanical aeration and going through all that work?
Okay, so let me just answer the question real quick, because he's going to go through this whole thing for the next 40 minutes or so, whatever. The answer is no, you can't. Zero. Unequivocally no. If you're fertilizing your turf with any amount of nitrogen, just a little bit of nitrogen, just normal, regular amounts of nitrogen, there is 0.0 benefit to including liquid aeration based upon his own study that I am going to show you. I showed last week. Did I do that last week, or I do that on members only? Can't remember. And it's his own data. It's not me saying this. It's his study saying this. So if you're going to do nothing whatsoever to your lawn, you're not going to aerify it, you're not going to fertilize it, you're not going to do squat to it, and you apply liquid aeration, then it's possible that you might see some very small advantages, some very small benefits to that in that scenario. But my argument back is, if you're using liquid aeration or some other sea kelp and all this other stuff, the odds are pretty good you're probably using some level of normal nitrogen application throughout the year. I don't know if that's, maybe I'm incorrect on that, but I would imagine if you got to the point where you're looking at liquid aeration, you're looking at sea kelp, looking at all this other stuff, you probably have an interest in that, and you're maintaining healthy turf, and you're probably applying a little bit of N or a little bit of P and K or whatever the case is already. And if you are already doing that, then his own data show clearly over 3 years that there is zero advantage to including liquid aeration. None.
So if we took those particular parameters and plugged them in to track across the course of the season, we should be able to get a pretty good idea on what exactly is happening.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. You're going to completely screw it up, John. You're going to completely mislead the public. I guess I got to say BS because I don't know what's in your head. I want to say lying, but I don't know. Maybe you actually believe this nonsense. And if you actually believe it, then you're not lying. But you're at least BS in the public. You don't care if what you're saying is true. Doesn't matter to you. That's BS. Makes no difference. If it's true, great. It's not true, whatever. As long as I'm convincing people to buy the product, that's what I care about. And that's what you're doing.
That's what we did. So in 2020, we decided to run with those parameters, with aerate against mechanical aeration. And we did a couple of things in there also that were pretty cool, say doing an aerate with the RGS, which was pretty awesome. We did it with our 1801 Green Punch. We did hollow tine aeration and aerate together. There were quite a few things that we ran through, and we're definitely not going to get into all of those today. We're just going to hit some of the high points again so that you can implement this into your program.
No, because so that you can convince people to buy it. Because if you included all the treatments, the context of the study would be more in depth, more robust, and people would realize you don't need to buy the liquid aeration. So you're going to cherry pick out specific treatments to shed a favorable light on liquid aeration. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show the data that you're talking about, but I'm also going to show the data from fertility, the data from just normal aeration, the data from liquid aeration with fertility, all these things. And that is cherry picking. That is exactly the definition of cherry picking. You look at all the data, you pick out one or two things that are favorable to you, and you just show that. And that can seem very compelling if to the public, because the public generally doesn't know that there were 6 other treatments. And one of those treatments is just what I'm doing already. And there's no difference between what I'm doing already and what I'm doing already plus your product. There's no difference. That's the reason you're only going to show a handful of treatments, John.
To give you some data on the soil where this was actually applied, this was a 5.9 pH clay loam soil and a hybrid Bermuda grass.
So I'm just going to show this real quick, just to show we're talking about the exact same thing. 5.9, July 15th, 2020. Okay, so let's go to the actual study that's published just a few months ago. And it's entitled Hybrid Bermuda Grass and Soil Response to Liquid Aeration Compared with Hollow Tine Cultivation in Agronomy Journal, one of our top tier journals, published by Dr. Henry out of Georgia. And he said 5.9 pH. You go down through, I'm not going to read this whole thing, guys. I already did it once. I'm not doing it again. right here, pH 5.9 pH, July 15th, 2020, and then again June 21st, 2021, and June 10th, 2020. Now, he's talking about just the first year of the study because at the time he did that video, they only had that first year. But this is the exact study he's talking about in this video. I want everybody to understand that. Okay?
Growing in it kept at a 1/2 inch height of cut, and that was getting about 1.5 inches of water every week. The material itself was applied through a CO2 backpack sprayer and just sprayed like, honestly, a lot of normal people would, but with a much more expensive piece of equipment. The aerator was meant for golf course use. It would pull a 4-inch total depth of core. Those cores were then taken and removed from the soil plot. They were not left on the surface as most residential lawns do. So I'd like to point out a couple of things on residential versus golf. Now, for the most part, residential lawns are just sort of in the habit of getting aerations done. So the reality is that residential lawns don't have the play, they don't have the compaction, they don't have big heavy machines running across it, they don't have people tromping around out there, they don't have people with 9 irons that don't know how to use them. Your lawn is a different animal than a golf course. And
well, I agree with that. I mean, you know, it's not the same environmental conditions and not the same stresses for sure. There's more stress on some lawns in some cases than there are on golf courses, and there's less stress on some lawns than there is in golf course in some cases. So, but in general, I agree with what he's saying. He's correct. It's a different situation
than a golf course green or even a tee box. So one of the reasons that those require frequent applications is the amount of traffic, the shortcut of the turf itself, and the need to keep the playing surface super level. So oftentimes, cores are pulled and sand is filled back in order to create that space and allow for a good, smooth putting surface. Your lawn is not being treated that way. It is totally different. And for most things, if you look it up, you might see something like this. Type into Google, do I really need to aerate my lawn? And you'll find out most residential lawns don't need it. Do lawns benefit?
Yeah, that's true. I agree completely with that. A broken clock is right twice a day. And he's right about that. In most cases, especially with things like tall fescue, these bunch type grasses. Well, I take that back. There are some bunch type grasses that can get thatchy and sort of need a little bit of attention. But in most cases, if you're going to aerify as a result or with the intention of alleviating compaction, unless you're parking on your lawn or walking across your lawn at the same location every day, it's unlikely that your soil is compacted to the point that it's limiting the potential for your lawn to grow to some color or whatever. It's unlikely. I mean, you know, granted, there's thousands of lawns, millions of lawns and so forth, but there's going to be some. But in most cases, I see these aerators going around town all the time in the fall, and I don't see their lawn looking any different than my lawn. I never aerify my lawn. My neighbor across the street, in fact, I stopped today on a walk today. His lawn looks fantastic, amazing, immaculate, tall fescue. Never aerifies it. Hasn't aerified it ever. So it doesn't mean you don't need to. You may have a situation that you do need to, but just keep in mind, it's one of these traditional practices that we kind of got ingrained in our mind, though. It's the fall, we need to aerate. It's the fall, we need to lime. Well, it's unlikely that you're actually going to see any measurable benefit to doing that under normal conditions. You need to know that the soil is actually compacted towards limiting growth. If that's the case, then sure. If not, then I wouldn't worry about it. I wouldn't pay for
it. From it? Yeah, they do. But do you have to do it all the time? Absolutely not. Here's another pathway to get you there without doing all that extra work. So first application, and even though...
No, it's not. Just keep in mind it's not. Okay. It's almost to the point, I'm obviously being facetious here, I'm joking around, but it's almost to the point in this video where whatever he says is 100% accurate if you just assume the opposite. It's literally almost to that point in this video. It's almost 100% inaccurate. Everything he says, almost. It's ridiculous. Obviously I'm just an extreme. I'm just joking around, but in this video, in the second video, in the third video, and in that video where he's being interviewed by another guy, you would be hard pressed to actually find something that he says that is true. I mean, about the study, you know. So don't believe it.
Over the first 21 days of the study, there was a change in surface hardness. And if we do a comparison between the control...
Oh, whoa. Hold on. Let me back up. He already jumped into the results here. Let me back up. Surface hardness. Okay. Let's start again. Surface hardness.
Work. So first application, and even over the first 21 days of the study, there was a change in surface hardness.
Okay, so over the first 3 weeks, there was a change in surface hardness. You got to keep up on this because he's going to speak so quickly. I'm going to actually flip over and show the data to align with what he's saying. So first 3 weeks, there was a change in surface hardness. Okay.
And if we do a comparison between the control, the aerate, and the mechanical, which is all we're going to talk about on that today, be subscribed to see more on this. So just do that. There was a reduction.
Control, aerate, and mechanical, the first 3 weeks on surface hardness. Okay.
Reduction in the surface hardness, basically the tension of the soil, using aerate and the mechanical aerator. Now,
okay, there was a reduction in surface hardness using the aerate and the mechanical aeration. So let me pull up reality. Let's just say that. So here is the PowerPoint. This is a PowerPoint of the actual publication. Like, you know what? Let me just show the publication here, just real quick, because I want to show that I'm not, hiding anything here. The actual surface hardness that he publishes is right here in Table 4, surface hardness, and you can see the non-treated control, the liquid aeration, and the holotine. So that's what he's talking about. Okay. Actually, it may be easy just to talk about it like this. You can see it right here. The 5 weeks. He said 3 weeks, but this is the 5 week mark, and then there's a 10-week mark and a 15-week mark. And you can see the surface hardness of the control was 18.8. And then the lower the number goes in this particular type of data collection, this instrument, the lower the number, the softer the soil. You can think of it like that, or the less hard the soil is. So the non-treated check was 18.8. And indeed, the liquid aeration resulted in a reduction to, this is change in surface hardness. So it reduced the surface hardness by 9.8 G maxes, which is the metric used on that instrument. The non-treated check was reduced by 18, so it got harder. The liquid aeration was reduced by 9.8. So it's a little less hard than the non-treated check, which is what he just said. And then there's the holotine. But look at the holotine. It's negative 14. Okay. And then what he doesn't mention, which is his little cherry picking opportunity here, what he doesn't mention is what happened when you just had normal fertility on the lawn. Normal fertility reduced it 3.8 to 3. From 8. The reduction was 3.8, whereas the reduction with non-treated was 18. The reduction with liquid aeration was 9. But when you add liquid aeration and fertilizer, it's the same as just fertilizer alone. You see that? Let me show it. Maybe, I don't know what makes more sense here, guys. Let me show it this way. And you'll see that the liquid aeration in the first, I don't know, where's it at? Non-treated 5 weeks. Is this right? Hang on a second. That doesn't look right. 5 weeks. That doesn't look right. Let me stick with the actual publication then, because that looks off. Oh, that's soil moisture. Oh, that's soil moisture. Let me go to this. I kind of screwed that up, guys. I'm sorry. I don't know how I did that. Let me see what I can do to fix that. I can't believe I did that. Well, now I'm just going to stay with the publication, because I don't want to say anything that's not true. So let me just stick straight to the publication so I don't mess anything up. Okay, so back to the publication. What he's saying is that the liquid aeration resulted in softer surface compared to non-treated. He's correct, yes. But what you don't realize, because he doesn't say it, is that just fertility reduced it more than liquid aeration. And the addition of liquid aeration to fertility didn't enhance it further. Okay. And then the holotyne greatly reduced it, greatly to negative 14, by negative 14 Gmax compared to liquid aeration of just 9. So in other words, holotyne aerification greatly reduced the surface hardness. Liquid aeration did reduce the surface hardness compared to doing nothing, but it actually did not reduce the surface hardness compared to normal fertilizer, just an 1801 fertilizer. So just a normal fertilizer would have resulted in a reduction in hardness compared to liquid aeration alone. And adding liquid aeration didn't do squat when we added it to fertilizer. Didn't do anything. Okay, so let's go back to the video and see where he goes from here.
Now, the mechanical aerator had an 8% reduction in surface tension, while the aerate product had a 4% reduction in surface tension.
So what he's saying is that the effect of liquid aeration and the effect of core aeration was very close to each other, 4% and 8%. Look at the data. I'm going to zoom in on this so you guys can see it. Negative 14 Gmax by holotyne cultivation compared to 10, positive 10 with liquid aeration. It's not even close. Not even remotely close. So yes, I'm not arguing that liquid aeration didn't soften the surface a little bit compared to nothing. But what I'm saying is, why is that biologically relevant? It's a type 3 error. By the way, on Twitter, there's this back and forth on Twitter, and the gentleman on Twitter, whose name is Preston, I think, got a note today to have a meeting and talk about this other nonsense going on. And what I would say is there's nothing in that meeting, zero in that meeting, Preston, you're going to go on Twitter if you hear this before you go on, that is in any way remotely compelling or interesting unless he hands you a refereed paper. I'll just say that, okay? No, I'll cut that out and no one will hear it. Because what'll happen is exactly what you're seeing here. John Perry's saying, oh, these differences were very close, 8% and 4%. But when you actually see the data published, there's a massive difference in holotyne cultivation compared to liquid aeration on surface hardness. A massive difference. There's no difference in liquid aeration compared to just fertilizer. Oh, well, I take that back. Fertilizer softened the soil more than liquid aeration. Sorry. This B right here indicates that the liquid aeration was harder than just the soil under just fertilizer at 5 weeks and at 10 weeks and at 15 weeks. That's what this A and B and C here are, at 10 weeks, and then the B and the C here. In other words, just normal fertilizer, guys. That's going to reduce it more than liquid aeration. And if you really have a problem, you need to go to full-blown holotyne aerification. That's what these numbers are down here. All these numbers are indicating that it's not just a little bit of difference between holotyne and liquid aeration on surface hardness. Not just a little bit. It's a lot. Holotyne is greatly reducing the hardness of the surface. Liquid aeration is doing a little bit compared to non-treated. That's it. So he's making it seem like his product is very similar or very close to holotyne aerification when in fact it's not. Not even close.
And that was really good considering only 6 ounces of material went out per 1,000 square feet and no equipment was run across it. So as the course of the trial went on, there were many, many fluctuations in the way the readings came across in all of the plots that were done. And the data was normalized to get, good information on every single plot and every single repetition. When we came into around day 85, there was a pretty interesting thing that happened where water measurements were taken on how fast the water was getting through the surface of the soil.
Okay, so now he's going to talk about water movement. And that's going to be shown on this table right here, water infiltration, table 6. So we're going to show exactly what the data show relative to what he says. And before I forget, if you're a member, you can go into the members posts on the YouTube channel and see a post probably quite a bit down of a little trick you can do on live streaming to help direct my attention to your post. But you have to go down several. It's only in the members only posts. Is it members only or pro members only? I can't remember. You can see it down quite a bit and it'll help me out. It's garden. Yeah. So, okay. And let me just say this while I'm going here. And sorry, Paul, I can't pronounce your last name. It sounds maybe Polish or I don't know. But Paul, who's a member, says, would wetting agents or soil surfactants like AquaAid's PBS 150 fall in this same category as a liquid aeration? And what I would say is, no, not technically, but the effect is the same. So the PBS 150, which has been around for ages and ages, will help reduce the surface tension of water and help that water move into the soil. Whereas in hydrophobic soils, that water would not easily move into the soil, and it can give the appearance of loosening up the soil. Well, the water went in, so the soil, this must have worked in terms of loosening up the soil and aerating the soil because I saw the water move right in. And that is a very clever trick that these charlatans will like to do, and that's what they've done with compaction cure. They've added in a wetting agent. That's what this Australian product does. They added in a wetting agent. There's another product called, I can't remember now what it's called, but there's several products. Most of these liquid aeration products will have a wetting agent component in them, or they'll have a reaction in there, which is sort of like makes a soap type of result at the end that helps penetrate water into the soil. Now, I'm not saying that doesn't help. That does help. So the turfgrass response and the growth following the movement of water into the soil, particularly if it was previously hydrophobic, will greatly help turfgrass in many cases. But that's the effect, just a wetting agent. Just go down to Lesco and buy a Lesco wet, some cheap quart of Lesco wet, and apply it at the lowest rate. Just do that monthly or every other month, whatever it is, and that will give you probably all of the benefit you're going to see from anything like this liquid aeration, and particularly if you're applying fertilizer. Because if you're applying fertilizer, the effect of liquid aeration in this study showed there was nothing going on compared to fertilizer. So the answer to your question, Paul, is I wouldn't say it's the same as liquid aeration because there is no such thing as liquid aeration. Liquid aeration doesn't exist. But the smoke and mirrors, the deception that occurs with liquid aeration, and the end result being the homeowner or the lawn crop operator can be convinced that it does work, is a function of the wetting agent component in liquid products. It gives the appearance that it is doing that. So what I would say is, why is this important to you? Because if you recognize this composition division fallacy, that not all those products in liquid aeration are actually doing anything, but the wetting agent is doing something beneficial to me, then you can just pull that out and just go buy the wetting agent, which is much less expensive, and just use that in your program, which I've said for many years on the channel, that anything, when you have hydrophobic soils, I don't know of another solution other than wetting agents. Wetting agents can be your friend. There is no question. Now, I would not just go out and just start pounding it on every lawn, because I've done some wetting agent work, and it's not all that common to see a response to them. But it is extremely common to see a response to wetting agents when you have the conditions of hydrophobic soils, and that's limiting growth. So good question, Paul. You're in the ballpark, but I wouldn't do liquid aeration the service of calling it a liquid aeration, because there is no such thing. Okay. Oh yeah, Shandi, thank you. Shani says, like and subscribe, share, and consider becoming a member to support the channel. Yes, please. Thank you, Shani. I always appreciate it when you remind me to do that. Yeah. Okay. Let me continue. I'm not sure where I let off here, but let me continue and see where he's going with this video.
And that led to something that was pretty cool. Both the aerate alone and the mechanical aeration had almost identical times of right around 65 to 67 seconds of water draining off the surface into the soil, while the control plot was nearly 3 times that high.
Now, so what he's talking about, okay, now he's talking about water penetration. So let me go to the water penetration. And I wish I could show this on the, I can't believe I messed that up. Let me make sure let me see if these data are the same data. It looks like I screwed that up. Yeah, these are the right data. I don't know, I got confused. Okay, let me show it on this bar chart, because this actually makes more sense on this bar chart here. Okay, so now he's talking about water infiltration. Okay, so now you'll see down here, the non-treated check is down here at the bottom, and then they have liquid aeration and the same treatments. I just put this in a bar chart. And he said that let me back up. He said that, what did he say? I'm getting lost here. I'm getting all kerfuffled. He said what? Let me go back.
Almost identical times of right around 65 to 67.
Okay, so in identical times between the aerate and the mechanical aeration, and the control was slower. That's what he's saying. Okay, so now when we go into here, you're going to see a change in water infiltration on the y-axis and all the treatments over here on the x-axis. And you had 5 weeks, 10 weeks, and 15 weeks after treatment. And you'll see that now in this case, water infiltration, the higher the number, the more water is penetrating the soil. At 5 weeks, the change in water infiltration from the control went down to 2 centimeters per hour, which is a little less than an inch. In other words, a little less than 1 inch was less water was penetrating with the control. And liquid aeration, it was still negative, but it was slightly better than the non-treated turfgrass. So in other words, liquid aeration had a small, probably, I don't know if that's, we can go back and look at the table. I don't know if that's statistical or not, but it was a little bit of a movement compared to non-treated turfgrass. But when you look at the fertilizer, it's basically the same. In other words, liquid aeration and fertilizer are essentially the same. But what did make a difference is in water infiltration, the penetration of water into the soil, was holotine cultivation. They added an additional 8 centimeters of water penetration per hour following one holotine cultivation. And when you added in liquid aeration to that one holotine cultivation, which is over here, there was no additional increase in water penetration. When you go to 10 weeks after and you go to 15 weeks after, it's essentially the same story. You see that the liquid aeration might have had a tiny bit of a benefit compared to doing nothing at all, but let me clear this off. Compared to nothing at all, but look at the difference between liquid aeration and just fertilizer. These two groups right here, liquid aeration and fertilizer, again, basically the same thing, whether it's 5 weeks, 10 weeks, or 15 weeks. Essentially the exact same response. When you go to one-time holotine cultivation or you go to two-time holotine cultivation, this is when you see massive differences in the amount of water that's penetrating the soil. That is what results in greater water movement through the soil, is holotine cultivation. And you can see right here, the holotine with 1x and the holotime with 1x plus liquid aeration, that there is zero benefit to including liquid aeration when you're holotine cultivating. And over here, there is zero benefit to including liquid aeration when you fertilize. Here's the liquid aeration when you fertilize. These here, all of these groups here, there's nothing's beneficial, nothing's happening. Now, when you compare it to nothing, untreated turfgrass, okay, then you could say, okay, well, compared to non-treated turfgrass, then maybe you have something. But again, who's doing that? Who's putting out liquid aeration and all these other biostimulants and not applying at least some normal amount of fertility? That's unlikely, in my opinion. Just so we can be clear here, these are the actual data that I showed in that bar chart. Just in case I screwed something up, I'll show all these data here, just so it's on record here. Okay, you can see. Okay, so right here, you can see liquid aeration did indeed increase the water penetration a little bit compared to non-treated statistically here. Yeah, so that did occur. But look at all these, man. Like, they're just massive increases in water penetration when you holotine aerify compared to everything else. So don't be fooled into believing that what he's saying is true. It's what he's saying is not even really that, it's off of reality, but also when you look at the entire context of all the treatments, you realize he's a BS artist. That's what it is.
And seconds of water draining off the surface into the soil, while the control plot was nearly 3 times that high. So we were seeing a reduction and seeing a change in how quickly water could get down into the soil. So,
yeah, compared to non-treated turfgrass, that is true. Compared to a normal lawn being fertilized, that is not true. Compared to holotine aerification, that is not true. Your own data, John. Your own data.
So what does that really mean?
Yeah, it means you're a BS artist is what it means. It means you're completely full of it. That's exactly what it means.
The cool thing about it is there is a thing called volumetric water holding capacity, where the soil can hold a certain volume of water in its pore spaces. Again, this is something that can fluctuate as the soil is sort of moving and ebbing and flowing throughout the course of the season. Well, something to take note of is this, is if you don't disturb the soil and remove the soil, you have a greater volume of soil, which can hold a greater volume of water. And when you take a look at the total makeup of soil, or just sort of the general put together, you've got 25% air, 25% water, you've got around 45% sort of mineral content, and then a bit of organic matter, and that's what makes up your soil. So if any one of them...
Yeah, I mean, in the ballpark, that'd be a great soil to have if you can get that.
Those kind of goes out of whack and gets out of balance, you could have compaction issues.
No. Okay, no. You're completely backwards, John. It's not that if any one of those gets out of whack, meaning the solids, the air, or the water, organic material, it's not that if any one of those gets out of whack, you will have compaction. It's that if you have compaction, those get out of whack. You completely flipped it around. In other words, if you're running your car over the soil over and over and over and over in the same spot, you're going to compress it. And that's what results in the measurable variables being, say the solids being 50%. Now you might have solids 60, 70%. The air might go down to 10 or 15%. It's not that you're looking at it backwards. And I think the reason you're looking at it backwards is because you can't make any money the other way around. If you can convince somebody that, well, the solids in the water and the air and the organic material are out of whack, so I need to work on that. I need to find some product or service that can fidget with that. Then I have something to sell. But if I just tell them stop walking over your lawn, stop dropping, rolling on your lawn, parking on your lawn, I can't make any money on that. It's the actual physical compression that gets those variables out of whack. Okay. That's an important distinction.
So if you aren't keeping track, we're answering a couple of questions. Really?
No, you're not. You're BSing everybody. You're not answering any questions. Your article is answering questions. The article by Dr. Henry answers a lot of questions. You're not answering anything.
Really quickly on what is this really doing for you? Number one.
It's doing nothing. It's padding your bank account's what it's doing. It's depleting my bank account and giving it to you. And in return, I'm not getting anything for it. And I do mean that. I'm not getting anything for it. I'm fertilizing my lawn. So I know I have, adequate fertility out there. And I'm buying this product and putting it out in your own data, which I'll put back up here. In fact, I'll just go to the conclusions. Your own data shows. The conclusion says right down here, liquid aeration is not a replacement for holotine cultivation, and most of the benefits observed in response to these products may also be achieved with the use of traditional fertility. So you're not doing anything for me. The fertility is doing something for me, but your product's doing squat.
Water is able to get down into the root zone, which means
compared to non-treated turf grass, which no one's probably has that situation. Compared to fertilizer, it's not doing that.
Means it's going to carry nutrients down into the root zone.
Well, holotine cultivation will, but your product is not doing that compared to fertility. It's not doing that. Holotine cultivation is doing that compared to fertility. Your product's not.
So that's pretty cool. We've pretty much answered that question.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I answered your question. Thank you. I appreciate that.
The surface hardness has changed on the soil.
It never ends, man. Even his summary, I can't get through. I can't get through without laughing. The surface hardness has changed. It's important to understand the depravity of these people knows no end. The surface hardness did change. I will give him that. Compared to non-treated turf, it did right here. Compared to fertilizer, it actually increased. This B right here means it's a higher number than the C. It's the hardness of liquid aeration. It's more hard with liquid aeration than it is with just normal fertilizer. I love data. It's hard. How are you going to argue your way out of that? You know, it's your data. I don't know if you funded it or not. I looked in the acknowledgments of this study. I didn't see any acknowledgments of the funding person or not, but it does say in here, where is it at? It's right. I love this stuff. It says right here, Greene County Fertilizer Company. That's the error rate right here. 5% soluble potash, 8% humic, 4% fulvic. It's his product and it's his study, and it shows it's useless. And somehow he gets on YouTube with no conscience and just spews this BS, convincing people to buy it. It's a racket, is what it is. It's unbelievable.
Which is also really good because now we know that there's a compaction relief that's starting to happen through the top and working down into the soil.
No, it's not. I mean, I wish I had an ounce of his charisma, you know, an ounce of his ability to say these things with no regret or thought of, you know, dishonesty and conscience creeping up in the back of my mind. I wish I had that. I don't. Look at him. I mean, you can look at him. He's confident. He's supremely confident that what he's saying is going to convince people to buy his product. I wonder what he thinks when he listens to this episode. If he realizes he got caught, you know, an honorable man, if he realizes, hey, you know what? Yeah, I was wrong. I didn't know that that's what happened. I was misunderstood it, and I'm wrong. An honorable man would send me an email and say, you know what, Travis, you're right. I was wrong. I mean, the data clearly shows that it didn't work, and I'm going to adjust the product line, and I'm going to do my best to move forward in an evidence-based manner. That's what would happen. I have received 0 of those emails among any of the charlatans that I've gone over on Tinfoil Turfgrass. 0. I take that back. I take that back. One of the first people I went over on the show, it wasn't called Tinfoil Turfgrass back then, was a guy named he comes on the show every now and then. He comes on the chat. His name was I can't remember. Every now and then, in fact, it's probably on my email. Anyway, he occasionally he'll come in and chat and he'll say something positive. And when I critiqued him, that didn't sit well with him at all. And he met with me face to face on Zoom, and he sat down with me and he said, "You know what? That's not what I intended. I made a mistake." And since then, he has come around full circle. So I take back what I said. There has been one person say, you know what, I was wrong. I made a mistake, and I want to do things right. And man, I wish I could tell you guys that his name, because it would be really good for him to hear this. And let me see. I bet I can find it real quick. I bet it's right here somewhere. I see his name pop up fairly regular. Oh, no, that's not it. Lawn Care Minimalist. That's the channel, Lawn Care Minimalist. I critiqued one of his videos years ago because he was going over some of my work and he misrepresented it. But we met and he's like, I didn't mean to. It wasn't my intention. And he was sincere. And he corrected himself and moved forward, and he's still doing his thing, and he's doing much better content now, and it's evidence-based and so forth. So that's the only one person that's ever come back and said that. Everybody else is just like, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing because I'm making so much money, it doesn't matter. So, but an honorable man, John, if you are honorable and you recognize now that you made a mistake and what you're saying is complete nonsense, send me an email. I'm sincere. I mean, I'm willing to pat you on the back and say, good job. Let's get back out of the rabbit hole and follow the evidence, and we'll go down there together. I'm sincere about that. I will really help you do that for sure.
But what about root growth? That was number 1. So let's talk about that for a second. So in the course of the study, there were definitely some cool things about root growth, and I want to get into a completely different video about this because of the ebb and flow of the way the roots went through the season, including the time of year where everything sloughed off, which is really important. So there was a measure of root growth that kind of came up through the season, and then as it transitioned into a new season, the roots kind of fell off, and then they regrew towards the end of the season. So there's different measurements throughout that section. But if we take the whole system and we look at it and sort of normalize the data, there were increases that were measured out at the very end of the season, and I'm going to name 3 that I think were pretty important.
Okay. So he's going to name 3 important things. So before he gets to roots, or as he's getting to roots, the roots are in the paper too. So let's look at roots. By the way, Dustin, thank you so much for that recommendation. I'll have to, I owe you one somehow. So the roots, he's going to talk about 3 things of roots. Now let's look at roots. So here's the roots, table 7, root biomass measurements, change in root biomass. And you'll see that indeed liquid aeration increased roots compared to non-treated. You can see this right here. The change was 0.027 grams compared to 0.012 at 5 weeks. And you can see that the liquid aeration indeed did increase roots compared to non-treated turf grass. Okay. But look what happens compared to just normal fertilizer. Look at that. There's a C right here. Nothing changes relative to normal fertilizer. Nothing. C, all the way 5, 10, 15 weeks. Nothing. Well, what about if we add liquid aeration to the fertilizer? There's a C, there's a B and a B, there's a C and a C. Nothing. Again, liquid aerification is doing nothing. It's not increasing root biomass. What is increasing root biomass? Holotine aerification. There you go. 0.041 compared to liquid aeration at 0.27. You can see the difference, but is this C and this A means that the holotine cultivation is resulting in a greater change in root mass, a greater increase in root mass than liquid aeration, than non-treated turf, than the fertilizer itself, than anything else. There's nothing greater in terms of its influence on the change in root mass than holotine cultivation. And when you add holotine cultivation plus his liquid aeration, you can see it's the exact same. All the way across. B, A, B, and a B. There's no benefit in terms of root growth or root mass of using liquid aeration as long as you have a little bit of fertilizer or if you're holotine cultivating already. If you're not doing anything, then there's a little bit of an increase. Okay? That's reality. That's his work. That's his study. Not my I'm not saying this stuff out of thin air. That's his own data. Now we go back to the video. So 3 important points.
Actually, I'm going to give you 4. So as far
okay, sorry. 4 important points. 4 important points.
As the root growth goes on these 4 different plots, it kind of went like this. On the control section, there was a root growth increase by about 5%, kind of in that range, within a margin of error.
A root growth of 5%, I don't know what he's talking about there, but keep in mind, this is the actual change in grams. What this means is the non-treated check. What this means is that at 5 weeks, the turf in the non-treated check was 0.012. It grew 1.012 grams more than it did at the beginning of the study. That's what that means. Okay. So that's what he's referring to, is that there was an increase in root growth of the non-treated turf grass.
Aerate section, there was about a 50% increase in total root mass, which was pretty
50% increase with the liquid aeration.
Now the mechanical,
which is complete nonsense,
did actually very well, boasting 120%.
120% with holotine aerification.
Mass increase. So it really did a good job with those big open pores to allow for the soil to really have space for more rooting. Interestingly enough, though, we did a replication with the Aerate and RGS, our root growth product, and we ended up with 130% increase in root mass.
So he's saying, oh, Lord. So the BS is flowing so freely now. He's so confident that he's saying that the inclusion of his RGS product that contains the seaweed extract or whatever increased it by 130%, greater than the holotine aerification. Well, let's go look at it. This is the seaweed extract right here, liquid aeration plus seaweed extract, and you can see, indeed, it did result in greater root growth than just fertilizer alone. I got to clear some of this stuff off here. How do I clear that off? There we go. What I mean by that is, so you liquid or fertilizer is here, and the liquid aeration in seaweed extract is a 0.033. So compared to fertilizer, there was a little bit of an increase or a few more roots grown with liquid aeration and seaweed extract. But compared to holotyne aerification, no. Right here. 0.41 is the grams increase of holotyne or cultivation one time or holotyne cultivation 2x. So there was no additional benefit either at 5 weeks or at 10 weeks or at 15 weeks of this liquid aeration with his RGS seaweed extract concoction compared to holotyne cultivation. You can see it right here. And here's the 5 week mark. Holotyne cultivation is greater. 10-week mark, the A and the B indicate that holotyne cultivation resulted in more root growth. Same thing at the 15-week mark. The B and the C here means that holotyne cultivation resulted in greater increase in root growth. So this is what I'm saying when I say he either doesn't know how to read this stuff, he's just lying, or he's incompetent, maybe he's delusional, I don't know, or he's just a BS artist extraordinaire. Because what he's saying is just simply not reality in his own work. His own work. I don't know where he's getting this from. Oh, by the way, I think I actually do know where he's getting this from. I could be dead wrong on this, but in the next video he goes over, he talks about the data and he says, this is what we found in this rep, and he starts talking. I was like, whoa, back up. You're just pulling data from one rep? One replication? Which we never do in science. We replicate things out so we know what the variation is and we can start comparing treatments one to the other, means one to the other. When you just have one rep, that means absolute bupkis to me. And so I think that might be what he did. He found one rep that happened to be particularly favorable and he just looked at that one rep. I think. I could be dead wrong, but you'll see that in the next video that we go over in some future video. I don't know, but I think that's where he gets this from because he's saying there's a 130% increase with this RGS stuff, and there's only 120% with the holotyne. That's just not true.
Without ever disturbing the soil itself. So out of those big questions, we've already answered 3 of them, but what about thatch control? This, I think, is something that needs to be kind of taken into a little bit more depth and looked at in a different way. And this is where I'm going to get into nutrition in general. If you are building up heavy thatch layer, there's a couple of things going wrong with your program. And yes, mechanical aeration will help because it will poke through there. It's not going to do much about your soil compaction, but it'll at least give airflow where there is none. And that is very important.
What does he mean? What did he mean by that? It's not going to do much in terms of your soil compaction. What? Let me back that up. I don't know what he's talking about. He's talking about thatch. And by the way, he is correct. If you do have a lot of thatch growth, particularly in a home lawn, there's a pretty good chance you probably are a little off on something. In other words, you're growing the grass greater than it can decompose. You're pushing it using a little bit more nitrogen than it probably needs. I'm not going to debate or argue sport turf and golf and those other things and soil production. I mean, if you need and you want a lot of growth, then that's what you're going to get. With you apply excess nitrogen, you're going to get a lot of growth, but you're also going to grow a lot of thatch. So if that's what you need for some reason, if that's whatever reason you need to have a tremendous amount of growth, just keep in mind, you're going to have a lot of thatch buildup because you're growing grass faster than it can decompose. And that's how thatch gets built up. So he's right about that. Something might be off. But let me see what he says about this. If you're building up a heavy thatch layer, there's a couple things
going wrong with your program. And yes, mechanical aeration will help because it will poke through there. It's not going to do much.
Okay, so because it will poke through there, it's not going to do
about
much
your soil compaction, but it'll at least give airflow where there is none, and that is very important. Oftentimes, however, doing a mechanical dethatching is going to be a better option if you aren't going to use a different type of digestive agent, which you can do as well. It may definitely take longer in order to take down the material, but if your thatch layer isn't bad or your dead litter matter, however you want to call that, thatch is technically roots. Most of the time what we see is dead grass blades, and that's what people kind of relate to as thatch. Airflow becomes your key when dealing with thatch, and that is going to make a big difference if you have to poke through it. And just reality is sometimes mechanical interference is going to be necessary.
Well, what he's basically trying to do, he has another product called Liquid Dethatch, which is another scam, another con, which I went over 2 or 3 years ago. I don't even remember. I went over a whole month of thatch. And there is a little bit of evidence that if these liquid dethatchers, if they have a lipase enzyme in there, there might be some benefit to that, but it has to have that enzyme in there that can break down this lignaceous tissue, the lignaceous sort of hard to decompose tissue that remains in thatch. But his product doesn't contain that. So don't buy liquid dethatch. If it has lipase, I'm not going to argue it. It's probably not going to do a whole lot, but there's some evidence to support it. At least you have some logic behind your decision-making process if you have a liquid dethatch that contains that. But I think what he's inferring, what he's getting to here is, liquid dethatch is another product that he sells. And that if you're not going to do that, then mechanical aeration could be beneficial. Okay.
So this is how I want to end this video before we get into part 2 and 3. Will there always be...
See, there's a part 2 and a part 3. If I can ever get my computer to work right, maybe I can go over those.
A place for mechanical aeration? Absolutely. You may need it for aggressive situations where you have to get in and drive down and make a major change really quickly. But in one season using Aerate, and this is something that we're going to continue to study because multi-year is important, we saw some major gains in the soil. You
didn't see any major gain. Multi-year is important. What gain did you see, John? Compared to fertilizer, compared to holotine cultivation, what gain did you see? I'll show you. Let's pull it back up. Right here. Surface hardness, no gain. Here's the liquid aeration. Here's the holotine cultivation. Here's the fertilizer. No benefit. Soil moisture. I didn't go over soil moisture too much. But you can see through here all these time dates, timestamps, 5 weeks, 10 weeks, 15 weeks that have liquid aeration. They all have the same A as fertilizer does. So there's no benefit from that. When you go to holotine cultivation, you can see that there's A's and B's, and depending on if you want to reduce moisture or gain moisture, it depends on what you want to do with it. But there's some differences there when you holotine cultivate. So there's no differences. There's no benefit liquid aeration there. Penetration resistance. Penetration resistance is actually a measure of how hard it is to push a rod into the soil. So that might be more representative of like pushing a screwdriver in the soil. And when you look at that, liquid aeration is right here, and there is zero difference between that and anything else except holotine cultivation, in which you see massive gains in the penetration of the soil. Sorry, I didn't have that on. The penetration of the soil. The liquid aeration has literally zero influence on the penetration of a rod into the soil. Non-treated check, fertilizer, nothing. It's all the same. But when you holotine cultivate it, you see massive, massive reductions in the resistance of that rod going into the soil. This is one of the most clear data sets you're going to find of liquid aeration compared to holotine cultivation on penetration resistance. It's night and day, like night and day, 3 years of data. Okay, this is table 5, liquid aeration strikeout right there. Water infiltration, again, the D meaning, so this is, all these have D's on liquid aeration over here. And you'll see, where am I at? The fertilizer has either an E or a D, meaning that fertilizer was actually better than liquid aeration or equal to it at all points. And then you see holotine cultivation. Every time level on holotine cultivation was greater than liquid aeration. More water was penetrating using holotine cultivation than liquid aeration. Now you go to root biomass, there's a C, meaning that these fertilizer and liquid aeration are equivalent. Fertilizer and liquid aeration are equivalent at 10 weeks and equivalent at 15 weeks. Again, zero benefit of liquid aeration compared to just fertilizer. And there's actually not a harmful effect, but it's not even close when you compare it to holotine cultivation. Holotine cultivation greatly increased the root biomass, greatly compared to liquid aeration. And that's all the tables, guys. That's all of them. There is no benefit in his own data set compared to fertilizer, and in many cases compared just to holotine cultivation. None. And here he is on the internet saying, we saw great gains. We saw major gains. We saw major gains in the soil and the overall, what did he say? In the overall
overall health of the soil.
Health of the soil.
And what it did for the turf and basically its growing medium. So I'm going to...
Yeah, and what it did for the turf. Well, let's look what it did for. That's the one thing I didn't show was that what it did for the turf. Let's go to what it did for the turf. That's going to be on the NDVI and turf quality table up here. I didn't show that. Here's NDVI, which is a measure of the green reflectance of light. And you'll see liquid aeration C, and BC. And then look at fertilizer. Fertilizer, only the treatments, including even halt-time cultivation, only the treatments that actually contained fertilizer increased the greening of the turf. Liquid aeration didn't do anything. Nothing. So whether it was soil, John, or whether it was the turf, John, what you're saying about liquid aeration having a profound effect, having big gains, is not true. There's no other way to spin it. It's not true. You're a BS artist extraordinaire. No doubt about it. I don't think he has anything else left here.
In the video right here, maybe that seems a little abrupt. That's because it's supposed to be. I want to leave you wanting more. So get ready.
Well, I don't want any more. I'm done. I don't want any more. I hope nobody else wants any more either. I mean, I can only imagine the thousands and tens of thousands, maybe millions of dollars that have been wasted, fleeced from people, stealing money from people, essentially, over products like this. You know, I don't know. I think if you look at the videos that, hi Aldo. Sorry, I'll put your comment in there in a minute. If you look at the videos, and I'm going to go over in the future, I'm not. I just don't know what to say about him. If he's just lying or if he's just an ignoramus. I don't know what to say about it. He's just so confident in what he says. Part of me wants to believe, well, maybe he actually is convinced that what he's saying is true because he's very good at the way he says it. But when you're faced with this much evidence, literally 0.0 benefit when you are already fertilizing your lawn or compared to halt-time cultivation, and you still get on there and just spew out all this nonsense, I don't know what else to say. Millions of dollars are fleeced out of our industry, stolen from people. It's just the way it is. It's unfortunate. It really is sad. Let's look and see what we have on questions before I show you my turf thought for the evening, which I came up with when I was on right before I went on a walk with my wife this evening. I'm like, oh, that's a good one. Let me come up with that one. I like it. Oh, Chuck says the 1801 is the green punch liquid fert that he does. Okay, so he added the green punch with liquid fert. With liquid aeration. Okay, that makes sense. I don't see a whole lot of questions. Let me get to Chuck Benzing, who left a question here. And it says, Chuck says, the study was multi-year, but the test plots were virgin each year, i.e. not replicated in the same plots. Is that true? Yes, that's true. So there's not a compounding influence year over year over year on that same plot. They did the study, collected all the data, and then they moved the study over to a brand new plot of turf and then did it again. So it would be representative of someone starting from scratch and applying it. And let me explain why, in many cases, what Dr. Henry did is the way you want to do it. When you first start off on studies like this and you put it out, or establishment work is critical. This is very important on establishment work. When you put it out and you collect data the first year, it's often different than it is the second or third year. And the first year's data, you often have to explain it in a unique way. It's bizarre because either the turf is growing in or it wasn't fully established or whatever the case might be. And oftentimes years will differ. But when you start from scratch, like a homeowner might just decide to apply it the first year from scratch, and you just do that 1 year, and then you redo it the next year on a new plot, it is representative of the first time someone decides to use it. What are they likely to see for that first year that they decide to use it? So that's why what Dr. Henry did was correct in that regard. Now, if you want to see what's going to happen for a prolonged period of time with repeated use, you won't find that in that study, Chuck. Yeah, that would be a different question that you'd have to ask and a different study that you'd have to run. So good question. And there's no right or wrong to doing that either way. But if you want to know what's going to happen if you apply it from scratch, Dr. Henry did it the right way by doing it new on virgin soil of each time of those 3 years. Oh, and Dr. Aldo says, please repeat that, Dr. Shaddox. There is no benefit. Yeah, oftentimes, and some of the criticisms I get by people will be, well, you can't say that, or there are no absolutes or whatever. And because on the channel, oftentimes I speak from a pragmatic perspective. I speak from a practitioner's perspective, but I also speak from scientific perspective. And sometimes I need to delineate those two or make sure that I'm clear on what I mean by that. So when I say there is no benefit, as a scientist, I can't say that it is, because you're proving a negative, and you can't prove a negative. But practically speaking, there's no benefit, Aldo. You're absolutely correct. And in the paper that I just showed, all of the data in that paper show there is zero benefit compared to normal fertility and compared to aerification, core aerification. There's no benefit. So you're absolutely correct. And it says, say it louder for the people in the back. I haven't seen you on here in a little bit, Aldo. Maybe you're on here. You just hadn't chatted or texted or whatever, but I'm glad to see you're here tonight. Yeah, and if you believe your own BS, then you're not lying. Mark F. says maybe he believes his own BS. And if he does generally believe his own BS, which no one knows that except for John Perry, no one can speak to what is in his mind other than John Perry. If he actually believes that, then he's not a liar. He's just a BS artist. And I would argue that BS artists are more dangerous than liars. We can go down that whole road at some point. That's a psychological, debate. But I think that BS artists are far more dangerous than liars, because BS artists don't care. A liar knows what he's saying is not true, and he says it anyway. A BS artist has no clue what he's saying is true or false, and more importantly, he doesn't care. It doesn't make a difference to him one way or the other. He's just trying to convince you of whatever it is he's trying to convince you of. And whether it's true or not true doesn't make a flip of difference to him. But to a liar knows. A BS artist doesn't know, doesn't care. Okay. All right, guys. I'm going to let you guys go. The Turf Thought's coming up right now, and I'll be back on Monday. I think Monday's a normal day. I'll come back on that. And last question, Dirty Garbage says, does it make sense to core rate every year? It never makes sense to do anything unless you have a good reason. And so does it make sense to core rate every year? It would if you have a bona fide compaction issue that is resulting in a reduction in the potential growth of your turf. If you have a bona fide concern or an issue, then yes. In fact, I went back and forth on an email today with a client who has old push-up greens. And we were going through some tests and looking at stuff. And I said, well, why don't you get some full physical soil tests done? And we need to know how fast that water's moving through. And the water's moving through at like 0.3, 0.4 inches an hour, which is exceedingly low for a putting green. You need to be up like north of 6 inches an hour if you can get it. And that's very, very, very low. The reason I'm saying that on this question, Dirty Garbage, is for that particular superintendent, he's going to need to aerify 3 or 4 times a year for many years to kind of get the physical characteristics of that soil changed to where the water flow goes from 0.3 or 0.4, which is very likely reducing the potential growth of his putting green grass, up to like 3 or 4 inches an hour. Get it to where that water's moving through and not resulting in anoxic conditions in the soil. So in his case, he needs to not only aerify every year, he needs to aerify every 2 or 3 months every year, or however often he can do it to get that material pulled out of there and replace it with sand. In home lawn situations, it's very unlikely that you need to aerify at all. So in your particular case, I can't say that you need to do it every year. The odds, if you're a homeowner, the odds are good that you probably don't need to do it at all. But you might be that one homeowner that does need to do it every year. You might need to do it more than once a year. I don't know how bad your condition is, but if the soil is not compacted and the soil has adequate moisture and airflow through it, then it's probably not limiting turfgrass growth, and you probably don't need to do it at all. I don't know what you mean, Dustin. Maybe a video call this week. I'm not sure if that's to me or somebody else. I don't know. And well, so what about USDA spec green? So if you're on a USDA spec green, Dirty Garbage says, if you're on a USDA spec green and you're parking at like 6, 7, 8 inches an hour or greater, then you probably don't need Aerify. And I know a lot of superintendents will say, oh, you're crazy, Travis. Da, 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 da. You don't, I need to get that organic material out of there. I need to dilute the organic material by top dressing or by putting in pure sand or whatever. Okay. I mean, if that's what you feel you need to do to keep the putting green smooth and true and all that stuff, great if you've had success doing that. But as far as the actual removing of a core to alleviate some compaction, if your greens are parking, I don't know there's no magic number, but I'll say 6 or higher. If your greens are parking 6 or higher, it's unlikely that you need to aerify 4 times a year, 3 times a year. Aerification in many cases on putting greens is more a function of like just pulling it and top dressing it and kind of re-smoothing the green. But as far as the physical characteristics of the putting green, as long as it's parking at high enough rates, aerification is probably not necessary. I don't know if you're a superintendent, Dirty Garbage, or not, but that's an excellent question. And I know that's not normal. I mean, most of the putting greens in South Florida are aerified 4 times a year, June, July, August, September. And then when they come back, it's, no aerification until next June or until Easter when everybody leaves and goes back up north. So aerification is extremely common. It's probably overutilized on many, many putting greens. But when you go in and you see the putting greens and they're rolling 13 and they're just as smooth as a pool table and they're hard and everybody's happy and everything's good. Okay, well, I mean, you probably don't need to do all that. You could probably result in that just fine without doing all that. You could probably reduce some of the resources and inputs in your putting greens if you didn't aerify that much, if you don't need to. But my name's not on the green committee list of people to talk to. In other words, my job's not on the line. So I understand if superintendents feel compelled to do that to keep everybody happy. But agronomically speaking, it's probably not necessary as long as your greens are parking good enough. Yeah. Oh, okay. You are. Dirty Garbage says he is a superintendent. Yeah. So if you're managing bent grass putting greens in the transition zone, I do not envy your job. I don't know where you are in the transition zone, but that is not easy. It's very, very. If you're in the southern part of the transition zone, I empathize with you. That is not easy. That is hard work. So if you can keep the putting greens parking high, 6, 7 or higher, then you might find that you can get by with a little greater heat tolerance and greater moisture drought tolerance by not aerifying the greens so much, right? As long as they're rolling good and the ball's gripping good and everything's fine, water's moving through, they're good. I would ask you to ask yourself, why do you need to aerify that much? You might get by with a little less. Okay. Oh, thanks, Chuck, again. Chuck sent 1 Turfgrass Epistemology membership to Aldo. Oh, and he says thanks. That's so cool, man. You're the best at that, Chuck. You do that a lot. All right, guys, I gotta go. I'm gonna be here all night. All right, here's the turf thought for the evening. I'll be back on Monday morning for the members only show. Thanks so much. I really appreciate all your time. Sorry I had a little bit of IT problem in the middle of the show, but hopefully it didn't take away too much from it. See you guys Monday. Bye. And now, Turf Thoughts by Ken Corley. Sometimes I think about the problem of BS. What do we do with it? How do we move forward when half the turfgrass advice is just BS-coded salesmanship? At this point in my career, I realize I am not managing turf. I am managing the BS around it. I think, in a sense, I too am in the business of BS. I think, if the BS stopped, would I be out of a job? Then I think, my wife is upstairs waiting on me. Why am I down here thinking about this?